Hello boys and girls, and welcome to our story lesson. In our last class, we learned to identify important characters in a story. Now the characters are the people or the animals that the story is about. We followed that by mapping out a story. So we used arrows to show how each character leads to the next one and how each event leads to the next event. In this lesson, we will be learning to plan a three-part story. Now, usually, when you plan to write a story, it's important to know that a story has got three parts. Do you know what those three parts are? Well, I'll tell you. A story has got a beginning. The beginning of the story is the first part. It has got a middle. That's the second part of the story, and an end. That's the third part of a story. So a story has got three parts. In the beginning of the story, you introduce the characters, the setting, which is talking about the time it happens and the place that it happens. In the middle of the story, you introduce a problem, a conflict, something interesting that happens, something fantastic, but something which must be resolved, where all the characters have to talk to each other and interact. And then at the end of the story, you have a resolution. So you resolve the problem. If something evil happens, then it's probably resolved, and then the story ends. Usually happy or sad, but I love happy endings. Now, one important strategy we can use to help us plan three-part stories is a story mountain. I'm going to quickly draw one now with my whiteboard marker. I'm going to draw a mountain, a story mountain. So it starts here at the bottom, it's going to go up, going to come down, and leading out. So this is a story mountain. The story mountain helps you remember that at the beginning of the story, you just start to climb. So it's not difficult at all. You start to climb, and then you get up to the top of the mountain. The top of the mountain marks the middle of the story. This is where all the events are really at their peak. So there is really a big problem, a conflict, something really interesting happens, and you're going to wonder, how is this going to be resolved? How will we solve this problem? So all the characters work together in the middle of the story to resolve a problem or find a solution or invent something, and then gradually the story comes down to an end. And then you climb down, and that's the end of the story mountain. So this week our story is Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and so I will use that story to illustrate how you can use a story mountain to plan a three-part story. So let's begin. The beginning of the story, where we start to climb the mountain, is with our chief character, Goldilocks. So one day, Goldilocks decides to go out for a walk in the woods. So we introduce the character, Goldilocks, and we introduce the setting. This story happens in the woods. So we've introduced the time, once upon a time. This means it happens a long time ago, and the place in the woods. So here, the woods. So we've done the beginning part of the story. Now let's move to the middle. She goes to the woods, and then she finds something interesting. She finds a cottage. So let's stick the cottage up here at the top of the mountain, because that's really interesting. She finds a cottage. And she wonders what a cottage is doing right here in the middle of the woods. It's so interesting. And so she knocks on the door, and then she tries to go inside. She tries to go inside, and then she's met by three bears. After she does all the things that she does, then comes the three bears. So now we have a big problem. We've got those three bears in the house. So we know that there's baby bear, we know there's daddy bear, and there's mommy bear. So we've got three bears. They've come into the cottage, and they found this little girl, Goldilocks, sleeping in baby bear's bed. Now, how are they going to resolve that? Well, the resolution is Goldilocks runs away, and she runs back home to her house. And that's how the story ends. So I think she has learned not to go into people's houses without asking, not to eat people's food without asking, and not to sleep in people's beds without asking. I don't think she showed very good manners. So that's how we plan a 3-part story. Came to a quick end, she ran away and never went back to the woods again. So when you want to plan a story, I'd like you to think about how you can use a story mountain to plan your story. A story mountain just tells you that a story has got 3 parts. Do you remember what those parts are? The beginning, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. That's correct. Now at the end of this lesson, I would like you to identify the characters and the setting that was at the beginning of the story. Which characters are in the beginning? Where is the beginning of the story? Does it happen at home? Does it happen in the woods? I want you to all classify that, put that at the beginning. And then let's identify the middle of the story. And then let's identify the end of the story. What characters are at the end of the story? I hope you have fun planning your 3-part story, and I will see you in the next lesson. Bye.